People who knew someone who died in a freak accident. What happened? A cousin of mine was electrocuted by a Dr. Pepper machine. His 2 children received $60,000 that their mom lost on bingo. Girl I went to high school with lost her father our junior year to an accident at work that was deemed the company's fault. The settlement was something around $250,000. She found out her mom spent it all, and sent over $50,000 to a television preacher when she turned 18 and was supposed to get access to the account that was there for her to go to college. I've only ever put money into my children's accounts. I can't even imagine doing this. $250,000 is basically a jump start on life. No debt college, and still have enough for a down payment on a home. A mom went ice skating. Little slip, fell, all everyone saw was her bump her head lightly. Family finished skating. On the ride home, she started speaking gibberish. Dad dropped kids at the grandparents', took mom to the ER. Brain swelling, coma, dead a week later. This happened to Liam Neeson's wife, only they were skiing. Fell and bumped her head, got checked out and assumed she was fine, and died later that day. Edit, thanks for the commenters who clarified, apparently she died 2 days later after initially refusing treatment. I remembered the details wrong, still very sad and unthinkable, though. Was just thinking of that. Natasha Richardson, who was a terrific actress. My insurance guy was pulling a limb out of a large tree with a chain and a rope. He was behind the pickup, his wife was driving the truck. Rope snapped from the strain and chain snapped back and hit him in the head, killing him instantly. He was in his 50s. Nice guy, too. Ironic thing is this is exactly the sort of scenario he would describe as to why you need life insurance. That's called snapback. It's no joke. When I was in the Navy, they make you watch training videos of footage of snapback happening on those big mooring lines, and big ropes will ducking move at the speed of bullets and literally explode your ass into mist. I was trapped on a small raft that went adrift in a storm during military exercises with the Merchant Marines. We went adrift because one of our lines fell off as the storm increased in intensity, and the other wet line was getting more and more taut as the waves got bigger in the storm. The raft was about 20 by 20, which means Therese not really anywhere to run if that line snaps, because the line doesn't snap back in a straight line, it flaps back and forth if you watch it in slow motion, covering a large area as it flies past you. We decided it was safe to throw off the last mooring line and just float adrift and hope they found us in the morning, then risk keeping the line on and get hit with a snapback situation. They found us easy peasy the next morning, but it was a cold, wet night on rough seas, on a small kayak raft. Taut ropes terrify me. I won't even trust them to tow a vehicle. My dad worked on aircraft carriers when he was in the Navy. Now, you'll have forgive my description of all this cause I really do not know much about it, but he told me about how the planes take off from the ship, how since there's not a lot of room for them to take off, they have to basically slingshot them off the carrier using high tension lines, and how if one of those lines snapped and you were anywhere near it, you'd probably be cut in half. Note, I misremembered and people brought to my attention what I was thinking of was actually the cables involved in the process of landing, or catching planes on aircraft carriers. There was a person at the beach who got impaled by a flying beach umbrella. Horrible situation. Her husband was right beside her and she died within seconds. Holy shit. After reading lots of these, this has to be the worst and not a death by misadventure. Alive 1 second, totally dead the next. Completely random, chance occurrence. To be fair, if I was going to die in a freak accident, I'd rather it be fairly instant than bleed out in agony. A friend of a friend showed up at his girlfriend's apartment with a head wound. He didn't know how it happened. He also didn't know how he drove over there. She took him to the ER where he ended up passing away. He had his keys, wallet and phone on him. The only thing we could think of is he might have tripped, fell and hit his head in the wrong spot. It was probably muscle memory that got him there. How awful. Or adrenaline. There was a woman who got attacked by a bear on her isolated mountain ranch. After fighting off the bear, with the help of her dogs, she got in her car and drove several miles down precarious mountain roads to the nearest fire station with her face ripped clean off and, one eyeball dangling out of its socket. She said she was almost totally blind and going into shock, but a combination of muscle memory and adrenaline somehow got her down the mountain safely. She did an AMA on Reddit once. Cool lady. She wrote a memoir, too. Edit to add, her name was Elena Hansen. Here's a link to her AMA, her Reddit account, she's still an active user. Hi Elena Hansen, and her memoir. I read her memoir and I quite liked it. She's a funny woman who has lived a very interesting life, even aside from the bear attack. Elena here. Thanks very much for the kind words, eldest. Me too, BTW. Coming up on 15 years after the incident, it's still one of the wackier misadventures of a life spent skirting the far reaches of the Laffer curve. If this comment section teaches us anything, it's to watch our kids and always remember, everybody gets it in the end. Smile. When I was a 13-year-old boy, I witnessed my grandfather die. He was less than 15 feet away from me when he was decapitated by shrapnel from a broken piece of heavy farm equipment. I'm 50 years old and still struggle with that moment in time. PTSD can be a real bitch. Something similar happened a few years back to a couple of students in the school I work at. They were sitting in their grandpa's truck while grandpa was trying to move some farm equipment. Not quite decapitation, but he got hit hard enough to kill him instantly. The kids were too young to go for help, like 4 and 5 or something like that, and they had to sit in that truck until their dad came looking for them. A friend slipped and fell in the tub. Cracked his head. His roommate found him a half hour later. Died on the way to the hospital. I've always been afraid of falling and dying in a bathroom. I tore my shoulder labrum falling in the shower. It seems like such an elderly person's sort of way to get hurt, but I'm not old. Non-slip tub mats are like $5, people. It's a good investment. I knew this kid in HS who always ran from class to class pulling his roller backpack behind him. So it's no surprise when he visited the Grand Canyon with family that he wanted to run down a slope. Well, he got going too fast and couldn't stop himself. His entire family watched him run off the side of the Grand Canyon. Oof. Edit. Now that I think about it, some of the people I went to high school with were wild. There was a serial killer who began stabbing homeless people in order to scare his dad into coming home, and also a teacher who scissored another girl during lunchtime. Edit. The sex kind of scissoring teacher saw serial killer classmate. There's a book called Death in the Grand Canyon telling the stories of PPL who died there. It's 500 pages if that tells you something. Fascinating read. Oddly, it made me want to visit the Grand Canyon, but while taking all sensible precautions. Bring more water than you need, drink at regular intervals and don't try to conserve it, start any hikes well before dawn to beat unbearable temperatures, never wander off the trail for any reason, and whatever you do, don't will your arms and pretend to be falling off the edge, because pretending to fall and then actually falling is in fact the cause of death for at least one person. I went there a little before the dawn of smartphones and selfies and was told that the number one cause of preventable death is people taking photos pretending to fall near ledges, on boulders, etc., including people being gently pushed to scare them. I imagine that's probably still true even if they improve the guardrails, since people were stepping over them for closer photos anyways. It's like 6 feet closer to something spanning the entire landscape, there's literally nothing to gain and everything to lose. Second, was dehydration, but that's true just about anywhere. That's about what I remember from the book. Longest sections were on death by falling and death by dehydration. Some interesting near misses are included as well. I already would never have crossed the guardrail, but that book made me want to give the guardrail itself a wide berth just in case. There has also been exactly one death by mountain lion in the park, and it was not from mauling but because a researcher caught the plague from a dead animal. Death by plague was not on my bingo card. My seal's aunt died of hypothermia. She went for a walk out in the hills in the winter. She knew the trail very well but got disoriented by a light snowfall and got lost. She got cold and tired, laid down by a rock and died of hypothermia. She was 100 yards from her car. A friend told me a story about her great-grandma disappearing in Massachusetts in the 1880s. They lived next to her great-aunt. There was 100 feet of woods with a very well-established path straight through. Think a strip of woods separating the properties, but in between homes that visit 2 to 3 times a day. Basically 10 or 12 folks with 2 houses to share, they lived so closely. She says it was a wide, clear path of dirt. Grandma had dinner at Auntie's house and left to go home. Somewhere in those 100 clear feet, she completely vanished and was never seen again. No rivers, no caves, no wild animals to speak of. They can only assume she either had planned to up and leave in the way you could only do in the 1800s, or she was abducted completely silently and carried away. No remains ever found. Wow, I wonder if any of your friends' relatives have done those DNA tests. Maybe they could find out if she ran away and had a family or just somehow died on that day. Those things are no joke. We found out about some family members we weren't supposed to know about after one of those DNA tests. Yep, found out my grandfather wasn't sired by my Norwegian great-grandfather, instead I got DNA from a sneaky Frenchman. Han han han. Z French baker strikes again.